If you have a dream and you really want to accomplish something, put the hard work in. It will always pay off no matter what you're doing in your life. Put in hard work personally with your relationships and your friendships and your family. Put in the hard work with your career. Do the extra work that when no one's looking, you're doing it and you're not looking for the accolades, but you do it because it's going to pay off in dividends as the road goes on.
Interview prep, baby.
Pass the torch, man. Keeps getting better.
Well, Kathryn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Danny. It's fun.
Yeah, pumped to have you on. We're out in Lake Tahoe, Hard Rock Hotel,
Yeah.
and it's the ACC golf tournament. So it must be a fun tournament for you, an event, because you don't have to cover it and you actually get to play in it, right?
That's right. Yeah, there was a slight chance I may have had to cover it this week, but no, they were like, we know you love to play in this event. And this is my 6th year. Would have been 7 last year, but the Stanley Cup final due to COVID ran late and it ran right into this event, so I couldn't get out here in time. But I love coming out here. First of all, it's a beautiful place. And then second of all, we've just built so many friendships from being here. It's like one big giant family. Every year you come back and you haven't seen everybody in a year, and yet you just mesh right together again.
Right.
And it's, from the clients to the athletes to the actors and actresses and everybody that's out here. It's just fun to be a part of all of it.
Yeah, it seems like a special event. And the game of golf itself, it really just brings everyone together.
Mm-hmm.
And so the game of golf has been in your life since you were a
Yes.
child, right? You played since you were a kid.
Yeah. I played growing up with my parents and my sister, and I never competed in golf. I was competing in other sports like softball and basketball, and then track and field and cross country when I got to high school and college. But golf was always just a hobby of mine.
Yep.
And it was so much fun for me to go out with my family and go play 4 hours or 5 hours of uninterrupted time with loved ones.
Yep.
And that's what I love about the game is you're out there. I mean, your cell phone's away. You never look at it. People always laugh at me. They're like, "What do you mean your cell phone? Where have you been for 4 or 5 hours?" I'm like, "I don't know. It's in my bag." I don't look at it when I'm out there playing unless I know there's an emergency or something for work. But I just think that the foundation of the game of golf that I had in my life has helped me in so many ways professionally and personally. And now I'm actually covering golf for NBC. So I feel like I've come full circle, but
Right.
it's been a big part of my life, my entire life.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm just getting into the game of golf and I start to love it. I feel like when I get out on the courts, it's like therapy for me, right? You get away from
Yeah.
everything that's going on, all the noise, and
Therapy,
you can just
more like you need a therapist after you're
Yeah.
done playing golf
a
with
few
all the
slices
shots.
and
Yeah,
then you're kind of
that's
breaking
exactly
a stick
right.
over the leg. But yeah, no, it's awesome. And so your passion for sports was obviously from a very early age. And so diving into your career with media, obviously working for NBC now, but was your goal always as a kid to work in sports and be in sports media?
Yeah. I mean, my 8th grade yearbook says to be a broadcaster, and I wanted to be a sportscaster. We had our own little page because it was a very small elementary school that I went to. So each kid got their own page for graduation. It was hobbies, likes, most likely to, and then it was what do you want to be when you grow up? So I knew at a young age this was something that was interesting to me. I loved watching Katie Couric when I was growing up on the Today Show, and I was infatuated with that aspect of broadcast. And then for me, I loved public speaking. In addition to all my sports I was playing, I was a part of forensics, which was an extracurricular activity at my elementary school. And you would have to get up in front of large amounts of people and compete against other schools. And I had no problem doing it. So I always enjoyed speaking. I always enjoyed, punctuation and delivering words accurately and speaking properly. And then combine that with my love of sports, it just seemed like a no-brainer.
Yeah, and so your first job out of school, was it directly in sports media, or did it take a little bit to get into the industry? Because it'd be hard to breach.
It's so hard to get, and everybody always asks me, how do you get in? I said,
Yeah.
it's different for everybody, and that is the truth. There is no, recipe that says do it this way, and you're going to get this part, this role wherever you are. But for me, I graduated Rutgers, and CSTV, College Sports Television, was a launch-up network at the time. This was in 2003, and they had just started, and they were trying to gain some traction, and they did this walk-on dream tryout. And I ended up winning it. It was a 2-day competition. So that got me in the New York market, and that got me a kind of a pretty looking tape, if you will, because every time I'd go into these beautiful studios at Chelsea Piers in Manhattan, I would record what I was doing. And it was, a great setup, great lighting, great hair and makeup. And then I would try and send that out to places all around the country, because coming out of college, I had a very bootleg demo reel in the spare time that I had while I was competing. I was trying to put together like a couple packages and features and stand-ups, and I sent it out to every small market in the country and just got rejection after rejection after rejection. And, you kind of know you're going to go to a small market and make no money, but that's how you get your foot in the door. Well, when I won this walk-on dream tryout with CSTV, it kind of put me a little bit ahead because I was able to build up a prettier resume reel, a nicer looking kind of polished resume tape. And I sent that out again after about a year to some other small markets, including Providence, Rhode Island. And they took the bait.
Hope you guys have been enjoying our interview with Kathryn Tappen. Want to take a quick moment to shout out Kawama, the best tequila soda brand in the game. They have no sugar, only 99 calories in a can. You can use code Kawama Blitz at the link in our bio for free shipping. Use their store locator to find Kawama near you. Now go grab one. Enjoy it for the rest of this episode. Let's go listen to the rest of Kathryn. Yeah, that's awesome. It's crazy to see how kind of the space of media has changed over the years, because you're creating all these reels on your own and yourself back in the early 2000s. But now, if you're good at Instagram or you're good at TikTok, I feel like you can jump right into the space a lot easier.
It's so different now. And even just with, social media and all these platforms to advertise yourself, that was not available when I was coming out of college. It was the way you advertise yourself is you fly to the middle of nowhere and sit down with the news director and have an interview and pray to God that you get the job. So it was very different, which I appreciate that face one-on-one interaction. I think that's incredibly important to understanding someone's, dynamic, what they're like, their charisma. But nowadays, I am blown away by how many people are getting jobs and have jobs just on social media.
It's wild.
So it is wild. And it's, I'm glad I'm on the other side of that at this point in my career. I think it's even, what I do is competitive, but I think that space is even more competitive and can be daunting and can be overwhelming. So I always just tell any advice I give, I always say, just stay true to yourself. Whether it's on Instagram or you go to a local TV job and you're a one-man band and you're covering news stories and sports stories, however you get it, just make sure you're true to yourself and you're being your authentic self, because it is a daunting world out there with all these media platforms.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And going back to those early days in your local TV station in Providence, did that grind in the early days ever feel like too much and you wanted to get out and get your classic 9 to 5, or were you always sticking to it day by day?
I think it was later on in my career that the grind really started to hit me. Early on, you're so bright-eyed and just like living your dream job and grinding it out. And I was in my early 20s and it was so easy and I was loving what I was doing. There were days certainly where it was tough. As a young 20-year-old single girl, I'm trying to, go out and have fun too, but I'm working the 6 and 11 o'clock news on Saturdays and Sundays. And I've got no life every single weekend, and all the summertime when everybody's having barbecues and weddings and all that, I missed everything. So that part was hard, but the grind, it's harder the higher you get, because, there's more eyeballs, there's more pressure, there's more scrutiny on you. And I find that the grind, in addition to that, just makes it that much more challenging. So I'd say probably, mid-career, like when I was at Nesson and NHL Network, was tough. I was commuting to Canada on a weekly basis to anchor a show that was on from 7 p.m. until 2 o'clock in the morning, because we were waiting for the West Coast NHL games to get done. And then I'd get in my car and I'd drive the half an hour downtown to Toronto to my hotel room, where I was checked in from October to May. And I would just open up the door, and it's a lonely existence. But I knew it was going to open up the door to something else. I didn't know what, but I was like, you know what, just grind it out. But those were really hard days and very lonely days. And I was away from home and just work. It was a constant hamster wheel of work.
Yep.
But yeah, it can be hard. And you do start to question, like, what am I doing? Is this really worth it? How much do you love this? And the reality is I do love it. So that's what makes those days go by. And that's what makes the hard times a little bit easier, because I have so much appreciation for what I do.
Yeah, you got to find something you love to be good at it. And I feel like it goes underappreciated. Like, so you do a 15-second piece and you're on the sidelines of a Notre Dame football game, right? People don't understand how much work goes into that in the back end, and like all the prep you did all week. And so I feel like in sports, media, and TV and television and whatnot, it goes really underappreciated, all the back work.
Yeah, I appreciate that you said that, Danny, because it's true. My family and friends that live day to day with me and understand my schedule and my routine know that. But you're right. When we do a Notre Dame football game and you may only see me 4 times, and each one of those hits might be 15 seconds or a coach's interview that's 2 questions, it's a ton of work that goes into that. Let's say 4 minutes of television that I will actually be talking or on camera during the game. It's a thankless job, but it's great, because in those finite seconds that you have got to deliver very specific information. You've got to be on point. You have to know your research. There's also a lot of stuff that I'm feeding the truck in commercial breaks, stuff I'm seeing on the the sidelines that maybe I need to get to the broadcast booth. It might not make air, but it'll help them understand what's happening. Maybe a player, hey, why is he on the sideline? Oh, he's just getting his shoe checked, or he's, got an issue with the equipment issue and it's nothing major. That stuff gets relayed constantly throughout the game. So you don't hear my voice, but I'm still working. But yeah, it's a ton of work. It starts the second the one game ends, you're getting ready for the next game. And it's constant phone calls. You're always at the kind of the disposal of the game that's coming up next. So I may have personal things planned, but we're going to get so-and-so on the phone for you on Tuesday at 2:00. Okay, I need to drop everything and make sure I can take that call. So it's a grind. It's, again, finite time on the air, but it's big time, and it's a very important time for the broadcast.
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions about TV, but it's time people start to appreciate the process.
Yeah.
And so I want to go back to your days at Nesson. So I grew up, I'm a big New England sports fan, grew up in Boston. And
Don't say you grew up watching me.
I grew up watching
I'm like,
you.
oh my God, here we go.
But no, so my question is, like, how exciting was it for you to work in Boston and New England during a time when we were competing and winning championships across like all four
you guys
major
are so
sports?
spoiled those years.
I know. It was amazing.
It was fun. Like, I grew up in New Jersey, so I was a Yankees and a Giants fan, and I go to New England, but I kind of had like a little bit of a feeder into Boston because I was working in Providence. So I was covering the Pawtucket Red Sox, the Providence Bruins during the lockout year. So I had a little bit of a taste of what it was like. But when I got to Nesson, I mean, it was unbelievable, the championships that were being won when I was there. I mean, the Patriots won 2, the Red Sox won, the Bruins won, the Celtics won, and I covered all of them. Yeah. And then I'm like, well, now what do I do? It's like, okay, career's done. Where do I go? No, it was so great. And what's even better about it is that now, I mean, I'm probably, years and years and years removed from Nesson days, but every time I go back to Boston, that's probably the city I get most recognized in. And that's the fan base that comes up to me the most. Being out here at American Century Championship, it's like everybody that comes up to me says, oh, I'm a Bruins fan, or I'm a Red Sox fan, loved you when you were on Nesson. When are you coming back to Nesson? So
you should.
That love of the sports in New England and the fan base, and they are so passionate, but they're also very intelligent. So it held me accountable on a nightly basis. Like, you can't make mistakes up there. They will call you out. So, and then you'll be totally, that's it. Don't make any mistakes because you'll be out of the market.
100%. It's title town, so I appreciate that telling us that we're great sports fans because we think we're the best sports city in America. And we are.
I know. You're up there.
Yeah. And so one of your more recent moments, you were a part of the first all-female NHL broadcast, right? So was that one of the most proud moments of your career?
Yeah. It's interesting how that came about. And a friend of mine, Caitlin Urka, it was probably we did the broadcast in March of 2020, I think. Yeah, right before the pandemic hit. Thank God we got it in only a few days after before the world shut down. But Caitlin Urka came up with the idea. She thought, we have all these women that work here. We have all these women that are directors and camera women and producers. And why don't we put everybody together and do a broadcast? Because why hasn't that happened yet? We have the resources to do it. And it was a great idea. We pitched it. It was an NHL game, which was huge. Right. And I think the week leading up to it, I realized how significant a moment it was going to be because the media attention was huge. We were the first to do it in any sport. And now, thankfully, there have been so many more after us, which is great to see. MLB's done it. There have been NHL games in Canada. They've done it as well. But walking into the studios that day, it felt different. Like, people always ask me, how different is it when you do a Super Bowl, when you do a Stanley Cup final? That day felt different. And it was an afternoon game. There was just this like vibe in the studio, and everyone was excited. Everyone from, the woman that runs my teleprompter for the studio show, to my makeup artist, to our wardrobe specialist, and then the producer, the director, everybody. And then everyone on site was excited and nervous. And it was Kate Scott's first NHL game, and she knocked it out of the park with her pipes like the second she came on the air. And it was amazing. I had chills. I had tears in my eyes. When I brought us on the air that day, I actually had tears in my eyes, and I thought, okay, keep yourself together here. But it was a moment. It definitely was a moment, and certainly one of my most proud moments for sure.
It's a huge moment for the sport, and I love it. All the emotion there. And so throughout your career, did you ever have to kind of get over the hurdle of like the stigma that women don't know sports and working in sports media? Was that a hurdle for you?
Yeah, and I think it still is. I don't think we're quite where we need to be with opinions and with people respecting us just because we're female across the board in every industry, really, when you think about it. But for me, there were certainly moments that I was put down and that I was told, I wasn't going to be good enough and I should go back to journalism school. Well, I already went to journalism school. So that was, not, that person didn't do their research. But I think, there's always going to be opinions, and there are always going to be people that don't think you should be where you are because you're a woman. You know, nobody looks at your resume and sees, oh, well, she was an athlete, actually. She might know what she's talking about. Or even if you weren't an athlete, you study the job, you do the research, you talk to the athletes, you gain your information. There's no reason why a woman can't do it, and it's supposedly a male job. So I think we have a long way to go. But there were definitely times where I had to dig deep and lean on the people that I love and care about the most, who help bring me out of those times where I'm told I can't.
Yep.
But yeah, the hard thing too was in my early days going into the locker room for the first time. I was, I didn't know what to do. I was looking actually at people like Jackie McMullen, who was with the Boston Globe at the time, and Alice Cook, who was working for WBZ, and the women that were in the marketplace in New England who knew the routine and knew what to do and how you get a player interview. So all of that was a learning experience. And I looked at the women that were doing the job before me to get advice and to also see how to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned some of your mentors there. And so have you kind of taken on that role yourself as being a mentor to the younger generation? Yeah. Has that been a fun experience?
It's been great, but I've never turned away somebody. I feel like it's the best way you can pay it forward. There were so many women that helped me out early on, and women that even just reached out, who didn't know me, who even just as recently as my first golf event this year, Dottie Pepper got my phone number. Don't know from who, never asked, don't care. But she texted me the night after the final round at the Honda Classic, and I thought I was gonna. It was a total fangirl moment. Like, first of all, I watched Dottie growing up. I love Dottie on the air, and to receive this long text message of support and encouragement was amazing. So I continue to receive that from women in the industry, and then I certainly pay it forward as best as I can. Anybody that wants advice, that needs advice, I may not have the answers, but I can certainly help based on my experience, kind of guide them where they want to be.
Yeah, I love to see that. And it's great for the industry.
Yes.
And so one of the most interesting and probably exciting events that you got to cover was the Olympics, right? How was that experience?
Yeah, I'm like, which one? We started
2014, right?
Yeah,
Sochi
was my first one. And I've done, I'm 5, 6 now, but the Olympics was the best. And it was a dream come true for me, because as a kid, that to me is like the greatest sporting event in the world. You've got nations competing, you have so much pride, each country has so much pride, you've got athletes who train their whole lives for that one moment, and so it was always a dream. I wanted to be an Olympian, but I learned very quickly that wasn't going to happen. Actually, one of my college teammates was Julie Cully, shout out to her, but being in Sochi, it was my first time covering Olympic Games, my first time working for NBC. I was with the NHL Network and they needed another host, so NBC asked to borrow me, so I was actually doing double duty, NHL Network hits and NBC. That was a grind. You talk about like days when you wondered, I didn't know how I was even functioning by the end of that trip. First, I'm in Russia, the time difference, I had no idea what to do with it. And then I was working 8 a.m. until almost midnight, going home, sleeping, and repeating the next day. But it was a great experience. I learned so much in those 2 weeks that we were over there. And I'm so grateful that we've had a couple more since. I've done Rio beach volleyball, South Korea, Tokyo last summer. We did Beijing from the studios this year. There's so much energy around the Olympics, and you work so hard to bring these stories to America. So it's awesome.
Beach volleyball sounds fun.
Yes.
That must have been a good time.
It was so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was something, that's a sport I'd never covered before. Didn't know anything about it. Flew to Brazil. My luggage gets lost for 2 days. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not starting out well.
Yeah.
But I leaned on, Kevin Wong and Chris Marlowe, who were my broadcasting partners, both former beach volleyball players, knew the sport so well. And I just kind of followed them around the 2 days leading up to the tournament and just watched what they did, picked their brain. I'm not afraid to ask questions. And I just asked a ton of questions to figure out who these athletes were, who I needed to focus on, what the right questions would be when they're done with their match. We had Carrie Walsh Jennings, who's one of the greatest Olympians of all time, who I now have had the opportunity to do podcasts with and sit on panels with, which has been really cool.
Yeah.
And she was such a fierce competitor and hard to crack. Like, there were certain times when she was competing, you couldn't talk to her. And I needed information for the air. And I'm like, well, how am I going to get to Carrie? She's so intense and she doesn't want to talk. But you find a way. And yeah, Rio was great. Beach volleyball. We were right on Copacabana Beach. It was the most beautiful setting I've ever seen. And another grind. You're working all day around the clock. It feels like you just eat and sleep when you can. It's like when you can. Yep.
Yeah. And so you've covered, like you said, all the Olympics, NFL, NHL, NESN, all the sports. Do you have a favorite?
I just got asked that yesterday on the golf course. I don't have a favorite, but I love being in the action. I love being in the action versus in the studio. So, there's nothing better than hearing the clanging of helmets and the hitting and the language and the smells that come on a football field. in hockey, it's amazing when you're doing a Stanley Cup final and you're in the arena and you can feel the crowd and you feel the energy outside the stadium. Because that's all part of bringing that to your audience. When you're there, that's the best place to get that from. So I love that. Golf has been fun. It's a totally different pace. I mean, I'm off the air at 7, not 2 a.m, for a hockey game or even a Sunday night football game. And we go to beautiful places. The sun is always shining most of the time. So each one is really unique and different, but I just enjoy all of them. I don't have a favorite, I would say.
Golf's new this year, PGA Tour.
Yes. Yep.
So has there been a learning curve there?
For sure. And LPGA, I mean, you don't know what you don't know when you first show up. So my first event, I mean, I didn't even know what time to show up at the golf course. I think I was there at like 7 a.m. and the producer said, Tommy Roy said, you don't have to be here this early. Like, we're not on the air till 3. I'm like, oh, okay. So like 8 o'clock in the morning, would that be better? But you learn, and I lean on the people. Dan Hicks, Jimmy Roberts are amazing. Roger Maltby, Bones. I mean, they all welcomed me with open arms. And then it just becomes, you figure it out. The PGA Tour is so different because each player is his own team. So whereas I'm used to getting in front, we sit down coaches for football, we sit down coaches for hockey or whatever sport I'm covering, it's more of the team is around it. Golf, each player is its own team. So when you're on the driving range, you may have to talk to the caddy or you may have to talk to their manager before you talk to the player himself or herself. So that was a learning curve for me. I'm used to walking up to players on the sideline, getting what I need, coaches on the sideline. So it's all part, but I wanted a challenge and I got it. As much as I love the game of golf and I follow it and I play it, it was totally different covering it.
Yep. One part interesting that you talk about golf, and I've had some other people in media on the podcast as well, they talk about the relationship building aspect of their job, and you kind of undervalue the fact that you have to go out and talk to these managers, talk to these caddies, all these people, and develop those relationships to then get to the access to the actual athlete, and that takes a long time and a lot of effort. Right?
And I going back to one of your original points, I think it's harder for a woman to get that because I remember covering so many hockey games and we'd be back at the hotel and, a male beat writer can saddle up to Sidney Crosby at the restaurant or pick his brain for a couple minutes and nobody thinks twice about it. I can't walk into a restaurant or a bar scene, walk up to, let's say Sid's standing there or he's with a friend and have the same type of reaction or response from people that are watching or from people that I work with. And that's hard because that's information that when you get guys that are in their candid, they're not in their game mode and they're not at practice and you get them off the cuff, that's when you get the best information. So it's hard and you're always battling that as a woman. But for me, those relationships come as quickly as right before I interview someone. For golf, I may have him, like my producer may say, we're going to do 2 shots and then we're coming down to you with Rory. Well, that gives me like 45 seconds to banter with Rory McIlroy or Will Zalatoris or Lexi Thompson, and you get some good information in that moment. And you also just kind of get them to let their guard down a little bit because you're just being yourself and trying to have them disengage and not be on guard. But every chance you get, you've got to find ways to make yourself different so that when they do come and interview, they remember you, they say hello. It's all part of this like rhythm that we have to be good at our jobs.
Yeah, I love it. And if there's one theme here about your career, it's a grind and you got to embrace it. And so I want to talk about some charity work you do before diving into some rapid fire and getting you out of here.
Oh gosh, rapid fire.
Because I know you got a busy week here at the ACC. But so the Marine Raider Foundation, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. So the Marine Raider Foundation is very near and dear to my family. My cousin, Captain Ford Shaw, was killed in 2015. He was a Marine Raider. He was a U.S. Naval Academy graduate, went into the Marine Corps, served 3 tours of duty, 2 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, came home. And, the thing that every family does when their loved one comes home from war is you breathe a sigh of relief because they're finally on home soil again. And that was something we learned the hard way is actually not the case. He was on a training mission in Florida, in a Black Hawk helicopter, and it went down and it killed his men and 3 members of the Louisiana National Guard. So immediately, when something like this happens and it's a tragedy that affects all of America, so many resources come your way and you're trying to just figure out which one is authentic, which one is really going to help you and your family. And the Marine Raider Foundation was one of the first foundations. It was started by a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps and his wife. So it was real. Right. And they came to our aid as well as the men who Ford perished with, his teammates. There were 6 others of them. And so we learned right away that this was a great foundation. And once kind of the dust settled on the tragedy and the sadness, I thought, how best can I keep Ford's memory alive, and it was to give back to his men who need our help. And so I got on the board of the Marine Raider Foundation. We host a lot of events throughout the year, one of which I help do in New Jersey and New York, and it's been fun. It's something I love. It's also a lot of work, because you have to give your time and commitment, and try and bring all your famous friends to
And
these
with
events.
your schedule
and
too, it
yeah,
must be a
and
lot.
so I remember being on calls in South Korea because we were planning our first New York City event, and it was 1 a.m, 2 a.m. my time, but it was important to be on those calls. And I know at the end of the day, he's proud and he's
Right.
happy and grateful that I'm helping pay it forward and keep his memory alive, but also help the families in need. We provide resilience in times of need. We help out with the Gold Star families. We help out with families of Marines that need help with their children or education or clothing, or something as simple as a child needs medical help and doesn't have the resources to pay for it. So it's all part of the bigger picture. And I think it's so important to give back to the men and women that defend our freedom.
Absolutely. And so it's great to see people like you with platforms, whether they're
Yeah.
athletes and media, to
Thank
be able to
you.
use that and create good. So congrats on that. So some rapid fire here.
Oh boy. Okay.
We can go one word, one phrase, take as long as you want.
Oh gosh.
We'll dive right in.
I'm not good with one word, so you might get a phrase.
Perfect. Favorite athlete growing up as a kid?
Oh gosh. I'd probably say Derek Jeter.
Okay, that
Yeah.
works. He was a he was
I
up, yeah.
think I'm trying to think.
He's a legend.
Yeah, he's a legend, and I
Yeah.
was a huge Yankee fan. So yeah.
Favorite athlete to watch in current day sports?
Ooh, gosh, there's so many. If we're talking hockey, I love watching Anze Kopitar and Patrice Bergeron. I'm a big fan of the Selke players,
I
the
love
two-way forwards. Like, you can't beat that, the grind they do. So that would be hockey. I'd say, oh gosh, golf. I've really enjoyed watching Scotty Scheffler. I think the way he gets himself in contention every week is truly impressive.
He's been dominant
Oh
this
my
year.
gosh. And yes, and winning. So
Yeah.
it's one thing to be in contention, it's another thing to win. So he's been fun to watch. I'm impressed by him. Who else? Aaron Judge. I mean, like, come on. I was actually at a Yankee game recently, and they went into extra innings, and they kept intentionally walking him. And I'm like, come on. There has to be like a
They
limit
have
on how
to.
many times you can intentionally walk this guy. Because one, I want to go home, and I know he's going to hit a home run and get us home. But two, like, I want to see him hit the ball.
I think the Yankees are going to break the record for most wins
yeah,
in the season this year.
they just might.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Favorite person you've ever interviewed?
Ooh. So I had a really interesting conversation with Teddy Bruschi very early on in my career, and it still to this day continues to be one that stands out in my memory. I mean, listen, I've interviewed the biggest superstars in the world, and they're awesome, but Teddy had recently had a stroke. He was young. He was winning championships, and it was a very, very difficult time for him personally, dealing with this health scare and trying to figure out if he was ever going to play football again or not. And I sat down, Michael Holley, Boston sports radio, TV personality, had written a book with Teddy. I read it overnight, and I sat down Teddy for a one-on-one interview. And it was early in my career. I was working for Nesson. It was an exclusive interview, and we talked, and I had Michael in one chair and Teddy in the other chair, and he was so emotional. And it was the first time I had done a sit down like that where an athlete got choked up, and he was amazed at how much I knew about what had happened, but also I had just read the book. I knew specific excerpts that I wanted to talk to him about. And it was just an emotional interview, and it was hard to get through it. And afterward, and I knew it was hard for him to get through it too, because he was talking about very specific personal stuff for the first time. And when we got done, he kind of stood up and he was sweating a little bit, and he just looked at me and was like, that was really incredible, and that was really well done. And as a young journalist, that's all you can ask
Gotta
for,
feel
right?
good,
Like,
yeah.
I nailed it, but
Yeah.
also I feel terrible for what this man is
Right.
going through, and I wish him the best. And I'm glad he could deliver this message to others, and others can probably gain strength from his story.
Talk about a Boston
Yeah,
legend.
yes,
Absolute
totally.
legend.
And so that one stands out. I mean, I've had amazing interviews. I've had tremendous, Hall of Fame athletes I get to sit down and talk to. But that moment and where it happened in my career and what it did for me was something that I'll never forget.
So what's harder, being interviewed or being the?
Oh, being interviewed.
Yeah.
I know you don't even have to answer that question. Yeah, it's hard. It's
is.
like, which makes me. I mean, it's so easy for me to interview people.
'Cause I
and
know
then
what's coming, you
yeah,
don't.
exactly. And then I sit in the chair. I'm like, oh, I should probably be a little bit easier on people. No. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
hard.
So golf here. Favorite club in the golf bag.
Probably my 4-iron. Yep. I tend to get it. What's that look over there? People in the room wondering what. Yeah, I love my 4-iron. I hit it really well, so it's kind of
There
my
you go.
go-to.
And so are you going to be more nervous at the first tee box at the ACC or when you sit down and do a live interview on TV? What's more nerve-wracking?
Oh gosh, probably the ACC.
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what live interview it is.
We had Joe Pavelski tell us that the ACC tee box is more nerve-wracking than a shootout in the NHL.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say. So for me, it's not really the tee box because I'm not like, teeing off with these super.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people. I tee off on the 10th tee all the time, not the first tee. So there's not as many fans. But I gotta say that 17th hole, well, that is hard.
I'll be there and be rowdy.
It is hard. I'm like, it's fun. I love the energy and the music and the entertainment, but you're like, please just don't hit it in the water. Don't hit somebody. Don't hit a tree. Today I hit a tree. I'm like, okay, we need to remove that tree for tomorrow and the weekend. I don't like that tree there. But that's more nerve-wracking to me than the tee box.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Because the first tee, you might have a bad shot. It's a mulligan. What are you going to do? It's first tee of the day. Just shake it off. Breakfast ball.
There you go. Last rapid fire. One word that best describes you.
Goofy.
I like it.
Which I think most people wouldn't know, but I am super goofy.
I like it.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate your time today. We're
Yeah,
gonna finish
Danny,
up.
this was fun.
One last question. It's our rowback question of the day. I'm wearing the torch or the hoodie here. You can use code TORCH20 for 20% off your first order at rowback.com. But so we talked about a lot of themes today. What is one piece of advice that you could pass along to the next generation to help them accomplish their dreams in everyday life?
Gosh, it's funny because I always ask that question too, and it's a hard one to answer.
Yeah.
But I think that you have to put in hard work. If you have a dream and you really want to accomplish something, put the hard work in. It will always pay off, no matter what you're doing in your life. Put in hard work personally with your relationships and your friendships and your family. Put in the hard work with your career. Do the extra work that when no one's looking, you're doing it and you're not looking for the accolades, but you do it because it's going to pay off in dividends as the road goes on. But, I have a lot of pieces of advice and I receive a lot of advice and I read a lot of books of inspiration, but that to me is probably one of the biggest things is to put in the hard work.
Couldn't agree more and be consistent about it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Kathryn, thank you so much for the time today.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Yeah,
this
was
was
a
fun.
blast. Yeah.
You guys do a great job, so keep it up.
I appreciate it. Enjoy the ACC.
Thank you.
Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoyed the content. There's plenty more Pass the Torch episodes, along with other podcasts we got going on and video series we do. So subscribe, and we'll see you later.